Welcome to the Bluecoat ProxySG First Steps video tutorial. This tutorial describes how to configure Integrated Windows Authentication, or IWA, in conjunction with Bluecoat Authentication and Authorization Agent, or BCAAA, to authenticate users on the ProxySG appliance. To complete IWA BCAAA authentication, you must complete the following tasks. Install BCAAA on a Windows server that is a member of the Windows domain. Refer to the BCAAA Service Requirements document for more information about installing BCAAA. If you plan to use Kerberos authentication, register BCAAA as a Kerberos service. For more details, refer to the ProxySG First Steps WebGuide. Configure the ProxySG for IWA. Verify that the appliance can successfully authenticate an Active Directory user using the IWA realm you create. Create a DNS entry for the ProxySG authentication URL. Configure the client browsers for single sign-on, and create the policy rules that will enforce authentication and, optionally, authorization. To create the IWA realm and configure it to communicate with the BCAAA server, select Configuration, Authentication, IWA Realms. Click New. Enter a realm name. In the Active Directory connection field, make sure that BCAAA is selected. In the primary server host field, enter the host name or IP address of the server where you installed BCAAA. Click OK and then Apply. Now you need to specify the type of credentials to accept from the user agent. By default, all credential types are allowed. The ProxySG will try to use Kerberos, which is the default authentication type for Windows clients, but will automatically downgrade to a different challenge type depending on the user agent's capabilities. For more information on credential types, refer to the ProxySG First Steps WebGuide. To specify the credential type, select the IWA Servers tab and then verify the realm name and domain from the drop-down lists. In the Client Authentication Modes section, select the desired credentials. For transparent proxy only, in the Virtual URL field under the IWA General tab, enter the URL to which to redirect client requests that require authentication. For more details, refer to the ProxySG First Steps WebGuide. Finally, you can test the configuration. Under the IWA Servers tab, click Test Configuration. When prompted, enter the username and password of the user in the Windows domain, and then click OK. If the test succeeds, the message also displays a list of groups to which the user belongs. For IWA authentication to be successful, your clients must be able to resolve the fully qualified domain name of the ProxySG authentication URL to the IP address of the ProxySG appliance. To do this, create a DNS record that associates the ProxySG authentication domain with the IP address of the ProxySG. The fully qualified domain name that you use depends on whether you are using an explicit or transparent deployment. For explicit deployments, set the host name in the DNS record to match the ProxySG domain name specified in the browser's explicit proxy configuration. For transparent deployments, set the host name in the DNS record to match the virtual URL in the IWA configuration. Configure the client systems to use the DNS server where you created the A records for the ProxySG. From a client system, ping the host name specified in the A record to ensure that it resolves to the IP address of the ProxySG. One of the main benefits of IWA is that it can provide a single sign-on experience for users because it uses the workstation login to authenticate users. When configured properly, the browser will provide the credentials to the ProxySG transparently when challenged for NTLM or Kerberos credentials. The user will always be prompted for basic authentication credentials. IWA only works with Windows domain credentials. If users log into the workstation with local credentials instead of domain credentials, they will always be prompted whenever the ProxySG returns an authentication challenge. Both Internet Explorer and Firefox can be configured to provide authentication credentials to the ProxySG transparently. By default, Internet Explorer automatically provides authentication credentials to any site in the local intranet zone. If the URL for your ProxySG in explicit deployments or virtual URL for transparent deployments contains a single hostname, you will not have to configure Internet Explorer for IWA. If your ProxySG URL, for virtual or explicit, does not fall within the intranet zone, you will need to configure the Internet Explorer to trust the URL. Keep in mind, however, that Kerberos deployments will require you to add the full URL to the local intranet zone. Firefox does not provide support for IWA by default, and will therefore always need to be configured if you want to provide a single sign-on experience for your users. For explicit proxy deployments, you must also make sure the browser is configured to send requests to the ProxySG. To configure Internet Explorer for single sign-on, select Tools, Internet Options. Select the Security tab. Select the local intranet zone and click Sites Advanced. Enter the fully qualified domain name of the ProxySG appliance for explicit deployments, or the virtual URL for transparent deployments, and then click Add, Close, and OK. Select the Advanced tab and make sure the Security Enable Integrated Windows Authentication option is selected. And click OK. For details on configuring Firefox, refer to the ProxySG First Steps WebGuide. Now we're ready to create the policy that enables authentication on the appliance. You can create a basic authentication policy that simply requires all requests to be authenticated and allows or denies access upon successful authentication. Or you can define more complex policies with rules that apply to a specific source address, subnet, port, user agent, or request header. Or you can define different rules for different destinations. You can also create policies that allow access to guest users. Finally, you can create authorization policies that restrict access by user or group membership. The following example shows how to create a policy using the Visual Policy Manager, or VPM. To create an IWA authentication policy, first launch the VPM by going to Configuration, Policy, Visual Policy Manager, Launch. Select Policy, Add Web Authentication Layer. Enter a layer name or accept the default name and click OK. Right-click in the Action column and select Set. Click New and then select Authenticate. Specify a name for the authentication object if you like. Select the IWA realm from the drop-down list. Select the authentication mode from the Mode drop-down list. Auto lets the ProxySG automatically choose an authentication mode. For more details, refer to the ProxySG First Steps WebGuide. Click OK, and then OK again. Finally, click Install Policy. To test the policy, browse to a few websites, and then go to Statistics, Authentication, User Logins, and click Display by User. A list of all users logged in through your ProxySG displays. Explicit deployments can authenticate HTTPS traffic without any additional configuration, provided that you have a valid SSL license installed. The following steps are required if you want to authenticate HTTPS traffic in a transparent deployment. Verify that you have an SSL license. Create an HTTPS reverse proxy service to listen for authentication requests. Create an IWA realm for authenticating your HTTPS traffic. Create the policy rule to enable the appliance to intercept HTTPS traffic. Create the policy rule that enables the ProxySG to authenticate client HTTPS requests, and install the policy. For more details, refer to the ProxySG First Steps WebGuide. Visit the Bluecoat ProxySG First Steps WebGuide, available at Blue Touch Online, to learn more about the most effective ways of deploying and using a ProxySG appliance to secure your network. For comments or suggestions about this video tutorial, contact us at training.books@bluecoat.com.